Hey, here we are again. Moto Talk with Steve and Kim. I'm Steve and that's Kim over there. Check out that shirt. That's pretty cool. Hope you're all having a good day. Hope you've been able to get out and ride some motorcycles lately with some of the good weather. But we'll wait for some people to get on here just a little bit. Hopefully you can hear us.
Yeah, I hope so.
Got a thumbs up. Got to turn Kim down a little bit, man.
Yeah.
You got some mic going on.
I do.
Earlier, I posted that you were going to spit some bars on some of these comments that people say, but yeah. I was just kidding. So, yep, this isn't Harry Mack right here. This is just Kim.
It's just me.
Happy Tuesday, John. How you doing?
Yeah. So today, in honor of the fact that there's a Meekum auction coming up, and wore my Meekum shirt today in honor of Steve's participation next week. It's also
fingers crossed.
The irony of having no bike on the lift is it's the missing bike formation that we're doing for the CB750 that's going on the auction block next Tuesday. So we'll talk a little bit about that a little bit later, but we'll talk about selling bikes in general along the way and some other things while we're going.
Yeah. And we've got some, I asked for some questions earlier today. You guys were already throwing them out in the comments. So we'll go and attack some of those as we can. Ron Mahoy hit 1,000 miles on his new bike. Yeah. He bought one of those Kawasaki. What is that? A 900?
It's an homage bike. It's a modern bike, but it's
modern bike, but like the old KZ 900.
It's styled like the old KZs. Cool bike.
Post that up there, Ron, what that is and what year. I think it's a 2020.
So 1,000 miles, what did that take? Like 5 hours, 200 miles an hour?
Well, yeah. I don't know. I don't think that bike will do 200 miles an hour. But all right. Hey, Dusty Pine. How you doing, bud?
How's it going?
Hey, so while we've got some people on here, I'll go ahead and, I mean, everybody that doesn't see it and wants to watch, they usually will watch it the next day or that night or whatever. 2020 Kawasaki Z900 RS is what Ron Mahoy bought not too long ago, and he's already got 1,000 miles on that bad boy. Hey, Roger. So let me post up a banner. The only news that I have for now is this right here. So we've got Dreyer Motorsports on West Washington Street. Bike show and sale Saturday, May 29th. I think it says 11 to 1. I don't even know. Let's see what that is. That is a Saturday. So we plan on being there, at least some of us, and we'll go down there and support Dreyer Motorsports. I don't know if you know this, but I think they are the oldest Honda dealership east of the Mississippi.
They're the oldest existing Honda dealership, period.
And they were, I think, the second dealership in the U.S.
I think the first one was in Portland, and then right after that was Dreyer in 1959 is when they started being a dealer. So,
yeah, they have been around a long time, and they actually they send us a lot of work, and they don't take that too lightly, and we really appreciate that.
Now, if you haven't been to that show, it's really good because for several reasons. One of them is they've got some people there that, as judges, they really know what they're looking at. Mm-hmm. People from the VJMC usually provide some support. At one point, one of the main judges was Ellis Holman, who, if you know Ellis, you got to have a lot of respect for his bike knowledge. He's been there and done that, and been the president of the VJMC at one point. So good guy. We see a lot of our friends when we go to that, West Siders, and it's not just limited to West Siders, but it tends to draw a lot of them. So go and participate, put your bike in it. Doesn't cost you anything. All you got to do is show up.
Yeah. So if you live fairly close, within the tri-state area, and you want to come over for a nice little show right there on West Washington Street, look up Dreyer Motorsports in Indianapolis. There is a Dreyer down in down south in Whiteland, but that's not the one. Excuse me. But it's a good time, and you get to see a bunch of people, and we can get out and about.
You get a free lunch if you're one of the first 100.
Yeah, there you go.
That's a good thing.
And you see a lot of cool motorcycles. I know a bunch of our friends have gone down there and taken their sickles down there. So anyway, look that up. They've got a Facebook page. And, hey, from there, we're going to move on to this right here. This is a bike that I bought not too long ago, about six or 7 years ago. And Kim can, I'll let Kim tell us a little history on this, but we both know that the 69 and the 70 CB750 were both considered first year. There were two different versions of the 69, the first one being the Sandcast, right? And they made 7,400 some, 14 or 18, whatever it is. The first 7,400 of them were Sandcast, and then they switched over to a die-cast motor.
Yeah, technically it's a gravity cast motor, the first one, and then it's a pressurized die in the second one. And then for 69 and 70, they used the same design. I mean, again, I'm kind of a Nazi about using the term KO because this is not a KO. This, in my mind, is a CB750, period. There's no O, no K, no nothing until the K1. There is such a thing as a KO, but it was only sold in Europe, and it was an interim bike that had some of the 71 features on it, like a gang together set of carbs and different pipes and some other things that made it look a lot more like a 71. But this motorcycle you see in this photograph is an example of the first design that Honda did for the CB750. This one's as honest as they come. The only thing you can see in this picture that deviates from the way this thing left the factory is the exhaust pipes, and they're identical to the ones, you know, from 10 feet away. You can't tell the difference. But those pipes are knockoffs, and they're just excellent knockoffs. But the rest of that motorcycle is the way it left Honda. It hasn't been modified. It hasn't been painted. It hasn't been taken apart. There's nothing on that motorcycle that isn't honest stand-up stuff. They've enjoyed a renaissance in the last couple of years, partly because the 50th anniversary of the release of that motorcycle was 2 years ago in 2019. And in addition to that, this motorcycle was voted the motorcycle of the century, which, if you think about it, in the last 100 years, there were lots of bikes that could have competed for that nomenclature, but this got the nod from all the motorcycling press and some other people. It changed the way people look at bikes as investments. There have always been big investments in some bikes, whether it's a Brough Superior or if it's a Vincent. Something like that has always been worth in the six figures, or often has been in the six figures. These bikes have recently really popped up in the radar of collectors and investors. I don't think it's a false thing because it's taken place over time. And I'd say in the last 10 years, a bike like this has gone from about $5,000 or $6,000 for a really, really excellent example, to going for, if it's a 70, the ceiling seems to be in the $20K range or $25K range. But given how many of them are out there and how many of them have been either modified or restored, one like this, which is nearly impossible to duplicate, will, I hope, and we're thinking, will bring money well above the reserve Steve has on it, which is a very reasonable number. But we'll see how it goes.
Hopefully.
And I'm sure it will. The thing that's making the difference is all of the early Honda air-cooled multis are going for big prices these days. If you haven't looked lately and you're looking at potentially owning one, there are some that are definitely good investments. Virtually any single overhead cam 4 is good. The 77, 78 is not quite as good. But everything 69 to 76 is definitely worth buying, especially if it's stock. The 500s, the 550s, the 400F in particular is going for a lot of money these days if it's a really good one. But, you know, you can't back off too bad from buying these. And it's funny because some of the bikes we think of as vintage, more like a Super Hawk or a 305 Scrambler, they had a kind of a high point 2 or 3 years ago where they were going for $6,000 or $8,000, and they've kind of leveled off. I don't expect, with the rarity of and the unusual nature of the first year CB750s or the first design, they probably won't back off too much from their values these days. I would expect,
and we can go back and forth about restored versus non-restored, but you know, if you haven't restored it, then it's only going to stay stock or unrestored one time. You take it apart and you're done.
The rare thing is that the cosmetics don't really hold up for a bike that people have abused. They need to be cared for. The one that Steve's selling is very definitely cared for and completely stock. And, some of us are a little bit harsh about what we prefer in terms of stock originality. And that can go down to things like bolts and cables and even tires, even though they're not great by the time they get to be 50 years old.
Right.
But if you're going to use it and ride it, they're still fairly practical users. The thing that makes that prohibitive is some of the CB750s, 69s that are really, really excellent examples of Vic World bike. Now they're in the $50,000 range. And
yeah, the Sandcast bike that Vic World back in the day bought a lot of the excess leftover stock of Sandcast bikes, and he'll put one together once a year or so, and they'll go for $45K, no problem. There were, I think, 4 prototypes before they actually came out with the CB750 and 69.
Yeah.
And then
2 of them exist and 2 of them were destroyed.
Right.
If you have any question about the quality of a Vic World build, there's 2 things that would indicate to you that it's a high quality thing. One of them is 2 of the bikes that he built are in the Motegi Japanese Museum that Honda supports. They thought his bikes were better than anything they could come up with. And then the second thing is, if you go to Barber Motorsports Park and you go to the museum, there's a candy blue green 69 in there, Sandcast bike that Vic World sold George Barber, and it's a really outstanding piece as well.
Awesome. Yep. And I'll give you a little story on this. Hey, Justin and Arthur, John Arthur. Let me go over to the Hoy Vintage page. Hey, Vlad, Tyrone, good to see you all. Darren, I keep forgetting to go to my page and watching everybody. James, Hoopties. I don't see those on the actual StreamYard, so I wanted to get over there and say hi. The background story of this bike is about 6-7 years ago. I found it on Facebook. I'm not going to mention who I bought it from because he happened to pop up and say a couple negative things about me selling it. But anyway, yeah, these bikes have gone up in value. It did not have the stock pipes, so I found some Japanese produced Yami pipes that come out of Japan. So they are exact replicas, no number replicas. And I didn't just store this bike in the garage and let it sit there. I rode this bike.
Yeah, quite a bit. You took it down to Deals Gap.
I took it down to Deals Gap and went up and down the tail of the Dragon. And like you ride you ride most of your bikes.
Yeah.
And I try to ride most of the bikes that I have, even if it's a collector's item, but yet keep them awful nice if I can. So anyway, this iconic bike, to me, it was the bike that started everything. For all the inline fours that you see out here today, all the crotch rockets, all the inline fours, the Kawasaki LTDs, the Z1s, the 900s. This is the bike that started it all. Yes, there are bikes that are faster, of course, because the technology got better, and the KZs came out in the early 70s, 73, and just started blowing these away. But this was the bike that started it for everything, and it's the classic look that I loved. So therefore, I bought one. And so I won't get into the reason that I'm actually selling it, but maybe I'll talk about that later after we see what the auction, after we see what somewhere in the 17 to 23 range. I think safely I can say that. I think the 69 diecast would be in the 20 to 25, maybe a little higher range now because of what you were saying about the market. And then, of course, the Sandcasts are, those are almost unobtainium. There's only about 400 out of the 7,400 that are known to exist in the world on the registry. So.
And there's some interesting things going on with auctions. And
hey, Malcolm,
we can talk about this a little bit without going into detail unless you guys want to. But Steve and I were talking about this before we started tonight. You can sell a motorcycle any number of ways. You can sell it to your friends. You can deal with the liabilities and benefits of selling it to your friends. You can sell it on Facebook or a mechanism like a newspaper if you want to, and deal probably with more local sales. But almost all of those have their benefits and liabilities. A benefit might be that if you're selling it locally, you're going to have somebody that can come and get it without too much difficulty. You don't have to fool around with shipping or anything like that. You're also probably not going to be participating in the highest compensation for whatever it is you're selling if you do it that way, just by the nature of the fact that you got a smaller pool of people buying it. And if you sell it to your friends, you also have the liability of, you sell it to somebody you know, maybe they aren't quite as up to speed and what the expectations are, right? And they may start complaining about it, and your friendship might suffer as a result. So you got to think about that. But when you go to an auction, whether it's eBay, and eBay has some goodness to it. It used, in my opinion, it was better once upon a time.
Yes.
But at least you're participating in a bigger group of people that might be willing to buy whatever it is. You just have to be careful about establishing a baseline, putting some kind of a reserve on it, making sure that you have good photographs and explanations, because the other liability of not Facebook so much, but eBay is that not everybody that participates in an auction in eBay follows through and pays for it. I know a number of people that have been into that situation, and Facebook isn't quite as effective as they used to be, or eBay isn't quite as effective as they used to be in solving those problems.
Right.
So you got to think about that if you're trying to sell something of that nature.
Yeah.
There's different ways to look at it.
One thing that I found over the years is that on eBay, you would typically get the retail money for something. Maybe not as much recently, but I haven't sold anything on eBay for a little while. But I know that whenever I wanted to get, someone asked a question in one of the comments earlier today when I posted this was coming up. The question was, how do I find out what the value of my bike is? Well, yeah, you have Kelley Blue Book, you've got NADA, and then you have what everybody's opinion is. But the way that I found is the true, like right now price is if you would go to eBay and you would look at completed listings of that bike that is sold. Now, sometimes you may not find a certain bike that has sold, but most of the time, if it's sold like last month, that's what it's worth, especially if you had like 12,000 views on the thing, or watchers.
I think people also want to try to hit the high water mark of what they think whatever it is they're selling is worth. And it's tempting to use people like Haggerty or even NADA to value the bike, because NADA says that they look at a bunch of transactions. But I think what happens with those transactions is it includes some other anomalies, like what happens on Bring a Trailer, and we can talk about that a little bit.
Or Meekum.
We've seen some crazy numbers come out of those things. And the thing you have to keep in mind when you're going to an auction like Meekum or something like Bring a Trailer is that even though you're reaching a broader audience, there's also fees associated with it to put you in that environment where where that money might be. So if you're willing to participate in it, take the risk, spend a few bucks to put your whatever it is you're selling in front of a group of people that have the odds to have the money to buy it, that's one thing you're doing. You're also simplifying the process for just about everybody, because it's not somebody that you don't know going to a Meekum auction with a checkbook. It's somebody who understands that Meekum's going to help enable that sale.
Right.
And they'll make sure the provenance is right. They'll make sure that the title work is correct, and they'll have some integrity in trying to deal with
and
that.
They take care of the paperwork.
Yeah.
I will say that this particular Meekum auction is in Indy. And yeah, Keith, you're right about eBay. They have feed themselves into oblivion, FEE. But the Meekum auction here is $350 to enter. So on some respects, that sounds like a lot, and on others, it doesn't really sound like a lot. If you're talking about a higher dollar item, if it were a $5,000 bike, well, yeah, that might be you might not want to go that way. But people do sell $2,000, $3,000, $4,000 bikes on those auctions.
Yeah, and I have an opinion about how the different auctions work, and I've had some experience with most of them. Like Cruise and Meekum and Barrett Jackson, they take what is available, they photograph it heavily. If it's deserving of being in their catalog, they spend a lot of time making it look right.
Their job.
Meekum does that too. They take the pictures and the information you send them, and they put it in in their listing so that people, no matter where they are, whether it's an internet buyer or somebody on another continent, can look at it and see what they have the potential to get. But there are others that deal a little bit differently. And then Bring a Trailer is another example of a place that doesn't work like most of the auctions. It's an online auction. There's no physical space that they occupy. They want to make sure that the photographs they have are very high quality. So they'll even contract and send a professional photographer to your place to take pictures so you can put it in their auction. I think it costs a minimal amount, $250 or something like that, for them to get that done, which is probably to your benefit.
But they're also choosy.
They're choosy because they want to make sure that whatever it is that goes on that auction actually sells.
They're looking for stuff that they know people already want.
Yes, and I think there's a connection, and I'm not verifying this in any way, but my understanding from other transactions that I know people that have cars sold on Bring a Trailer, they've put their vehicle on Bring a Trailer, and they've discovered that there are dealers that already knew who was interested in that particular vehicle before they even started bidding. So the dealer might have established a value for that customer, and once that value has been established, they start bidding on it, and they'll bid until the customer's money runs out, basically, is what happens. And we've seen some things kind of go off the deep end with Bring a Trailer. There was a Honda Dream on there that understandably was a very nice example of a Honda Dream, but it wasn't absolutely perfect or immaculate. And it wound up selling for like $25,000 or $26,000, which is probably not indicative of what a Honda Dream would sell for if it was a really nice one.
I still don't quite believe that one.
Yeah, well, but again, if a dealer knows somebody who's willing to pay whatever it costs to get something, they have a way to do that.
Right.
And I'm not picking on that. I know we have some friends that we're going to ask them to join us at some point, but they run a company in Ohio called Mr. CBX. And those guys know CBXs backward and forward. One of the younger, Robbie Rignalda, actually races a modified CBX. He's been a heavyweight champion in that bike class in ARMA and some other things. He races AMA. But his dad, Jan, was the co-creator of a book called the CBX book. And there were a number of people saying when CBXs went for sale, like on a Facebook affinity group for CBXs, they would say, oh, there's no way in the world somebody's going to pay $10,000 for a CBX.
Right.
And Jan and Robbie both said, well, no, that's not true, because they'll show a picture of a nice red 79 and they'll say, well, this one sold for 18 grand.
Right.
And now if you look at CBXs and what they're going for, they're way north of that number.
Yeah.
Especially if they're real ones.
It seemed like it took them a while to catch up with what you thought they would be.
Yeah,
should be worth.
I think,
especially the first 2 years.
Yeah. And somebody asked a question in the list of questions we got before we started this. What are the odds that these bikes are going to continue? Are they going to have legs as an investment?
Oh yeah, future.
And that's a great question, but they certainly aren't going to make any more single overhead cam Honda CB750s, especially the first version. And they're not going to make any more CBXs. It would be outrageously expensive for them to do that. So, thinking about what a modern bike costs, if you can walk into a dealership, and let's leave out things like Vlad Zegli Vincent, that's probably not indicative of what you could walk into a dealer and buy. But if you go in to even the Triumph dealership, it's easy to spend $25,000 on a motorcycle. So if you can get one of those peculiar, and I see unicorn used as a word here from Dusty, that's probably a good example. If you're looking for a non-beat CB750, it's going to be difficult to come up with. That's why yours is going to bring a good number. If you're looking for a non-beat CBX, that's nearly impossible. So if you find a really good one, they go for big bucks.
Yeah. I found that I almost called them regular CBs, the 73 456, which you would put at the lower end of the market, an original 76 in really good shape with the pipes and everything. I mean, those are probably north of $5,000.
Oh yeah, they're well north of $5,000,
if not more. And when I first started in this, 10 years ago, as far as like really liking these CB750s and collecting some parts and such, the 72, it wasn't worth that much now, but even a restored one could bring, somewhere around the 10 grand range,
Yeah,
but there's 15 to restore.
Yeah, absolutely. And Dusty made a good point a minute ago. I saw his feed making the comment that you can look at a bike like this, and if you're not knowledgeable, you'll think it's just another $500 buying find. if you're not familiar with the bike and you don't know its provenance and you don't know the significance, you'd think spending 20 grand on something like that would be crazy. But there's a pretty big community of people that understand and are willing to spend that money.
Yeah. And to Keith's point right here, once the, what do you say? Once the generation that grew up with those era bikes fades away, then the value of the next, decade
that's probably
may
right.
go up. And we've talked about that with the CT70s, with Little Bikes here in Brownsburg. He's been pumping out CT70s like crazy, and he'll take a frame and an engine of a real one, and have both of those restored. And then there's a company where you can buy all the rest of the parts and you can put it together, and they're bringing $7,500. And then if you put one on Mecum, they bring almost $10,000, which is incredible.
Yeah, and they don't have to have
Keith and I've been
parts.
like shaking our heads going, how does this actually happen?
Well, I think to Keith's point, we've seen a couple of things. If you've watched cars go through Mecum or Barrett Jackson, there was a time 5, 6, 10 years ago where if you had a Hemi Barracuda, it was going to be $1 million plus. And that was a speculator's market where people with all the money in the world were trying to make money on those cars. And they bought cars for $1 million, and they found out 5 or 6 years later they were worth $250. And that wasn't good. But I think they traveled that path. Same thing with big block Corvettes. Big block Corvettes 5, 6 years ago, if it was a 67 or even a 65, they were bringing in the $250,000, $300,000 range, and now they're kind of back down to about 150, 160.
Yeah.
So it's still a lot of money. Don't make a mistake thinking it's not a lot of money. But the blue chip versions, like Steve's bike, anything that's stock and in really good shape is going to be a blue chip investment. And if you don't have the money, don't buy it. If you don't plan to ride it, I wouldn't buy it either. But my advice is, if you want something like that, it's probably not bad to keep in mind how much you're going to spend and buy something that's in the sweet spot of what they're worth, not something like a $25,000 dream.
And I will say that one of the reasons that I am able to let this particular bike go, as special as it is that I would rather down the road have an actual 69. The next best thing from a 70 is a 69, and the next best thing after that, it would be a 69 Sandcast. But
then you probably wouldn't.
I don't want to spend $50K on that or go out and ride it either. So, well, hey, let's transition to a couple little things. Let's go back to our comments and just do like a quick look at some of these questions and just give some like quick answers. I know Matt Ring was asking about his carburetors on his Airhead BMW. How to dial those in. There's probably not a quick way to tell him that, but
no, the quick way to tell you that is they're Bing carburetors and they're complicated, and to get it done right, you got to make sure some things are relatively correct, and that's easier to do and pay for than it is to explain. So I would say, we can do it.
All right. Randy Schwartz, he says, best helmet brands, or how to tell if a helmet is safe and the correct size.
So a couple things. You can buy a helmet that's got DOT written on it, and that's kind of important, but that's not the only. There's another version of how they're regulated, and it's called Snell. And Snell helmets would be an example of a helmet that met the criteria of like even Formula One and IndyCar, whereas a DOT helmet does not. And I learned that the hard way. I had a DOT helmet that was brand new, and I went to a sprint car event, and they wouldn't let me use it. So I thought, it wasn't a Snell standard.
And so sometimes the price will tell you whether it's definitely a good helmet or not. So,
but you can buy an inexpensive Snell helmet. It's just not going to be the same thing as an inexpensive DOT helmet.
And the correct fit would be if you put it on and it's kind of squishing your cheeks in a little bit, but not to where it's pushing the blood out of your head.
Yeah, you're supposed to be able to put a helmet on relatively easily and not buckle the strap and shake your head. And if it doesn't move a lot when you shake your head, that's probably a good fit.
Michael Rapp says, oil, what is it good for?
Absolutely nothing.
Okay, so we answered that question. That was the correct answer. Let's see, fork seals and air and tubes, or fork oil springs and braces. Jeffrey G.
I don't know what kind of question that is. There is going to be air in the tubes, even if you put springs in it.
Yeah,
but
you might be talking about the ones that you can fill with air or whatever.
The issue
that might be another show. Suspension.
Yeah, it could be another show. But the short answer to that is a spring won't allow the motorcycle to fall down on its suspension. So I would recommend Good fork oil. Fork braces are important in some bikes, and they'll make fun of you if you put one on a CBX. I've learned that. But the best thing to do with springs is if your motorcycle is a common one, get progressive springs and put in there. It makes all the difference in the world in the way the bike handles.
Sonic Force for a 747. I think you guys need to educate yourselves on helmet certification, Snell versus. So, okay. You can educate us if you want to. Go ahead and post something in the comments there and we'll show it to everybody, and we'll see what that says there.
Yeah, I'll respect somebody with deeper knowledge. I just know from practical experience.
We're doing a quick shoot here.
It's not the same thing.
Yeah. All right. So we already talked about Randy Schwinn sent something in. How do you find out what it's worth to restore what it's worth, resulting in accusations of, when you post something on a Facebook page, I've got this bike, what's it worth? And then everybody gives you heck because you're trying to fish for what it's worth, even if you think you already know or whatever. But that's just Facebook. Facebook has a bunch of
and
trolls
first of all,
out there.
If you're going to do that, you got to be tough enough to take all the crap that you're going to get from Facebook people. And the second thing is, if you just say, hey, I have this motorcycle, I think it's worth this, what do you think? At least you put a number out there as a starting point and people can weigh in on what they think.
Sure.
And there is no good answer to determining what they're worth. It's worth what somebody will pay. I've heard that over and over.
Okay. Crickets on Sonics. Maybe he's looking it up. He might be Googling on there, but we're not going to be mean at anybody.
I do know that the worldwide standard on helmet testing is that it's supposed to survive a 6-foot fall from a position onto a pointed hard object. And if you think about that, that's about a 15-mile-an-hour hit. So even the best helmets are not intended to save your head from a 30-mile-an-hour whack.
Right.
There's a lot of reasons why it's a good idea.
And when you're out there just doing some fun riding, not racing, anything you put on your head is better than not having anything on there. And there is no helmet law. So,
it looks like Keith's ceiling is $50.
Keith's got $50 helmets.
And it means he's got a $50 head.
Yeah, but we don't claim to know everything. Let's see. Let me go over to Hoy Vintage Cycles and see what we got here. How about your thoughts on a modified old bike? So John Arthur posted a Gold Wing that's been kind of personalized, modded, and it's to each his own. If you can make it run really well and make it stop really well, it doesn't really matter what it looks like as long as you like how it looks.
Yeah, I think this one reflects your taste, however that gets interpreted, but you've got the shocks on there that belong on there. You've got the front end on it that belongs on there. You've added some things, and that's cool. The only thing I see about this that I'd have a hard time with is you took the front fender off, which makes the front end a little bit less happy.
Yeah. Okay. So let me go to this next one here. Ralph Johnson has a CB750. Looks like he's got some aftermarket paint, but has the correct swoosh and all that. Or maybe
nice looking bike. Really,
it might just be. Sometimes you take a picture like my CB750 with the blue green. If you take it in here, it just looks really blue.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the lighting, sometimes it's the camera.
That's really yellow though. I don't think they made it yellow.
That looks yellow, and he's just asking on thoughts about lowering his CB750 an inch or two. I'm
always going to give the same answer.
I know
don't do it.
You're going to give the answer. Don't do it. Some people don't like being on their tippy toes, and they're not necessarily a tall bike, but it's a wide seat. So it makes your legs go out a little bit, kind of bow-legged. But, anytime you lose height underneath the bike, you lose the turning ability. So not that it's a race bike, but...
and it's controllability in general. If you don't have any suspension travel, you're going to bottom out more often. You're going to have issues.
That's true. Okay,
I like the black wheels on that bike.
Yeah, that does look pretty cool. Now, we obviously people can't see what we're seeing, but what I'm doing, guys, is I'm going to our Facebook pages, my Facebook page and the Hoy Vintage page, and I'm just going through all the questions that you threw on the comments earlier before the show even started. And then, of course, as you comment down through the show, we'll answer those too. But hey, Malakote, how you doing? Let's see, he said he went to Barber last week. And 3.5 hours of pure glory. Yeah, it is an overwhelming thing when you go down to Barber and you walk in that museum. It's just like it's motorcycle galore.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing it in 3.5 hours. That must have been hitting all the high points that were important to you, because I took 2 days and didn't see it all.
Yeah, and I went down there with you for the first time a couple years ago, and yeah, it's kind of like
Dwayne and Jenna toured together.
Yeah, it's almost like going downtown and seeing motorcycles on Meridian for the first time. I mean, it's just like, and I don't mean those bikes.
Quality might be a little different.
Yeah, it's an overwhelming, like, you just like OD on motorcycles, basically.
Yeah, and what you see when you go to Barber is about a third of the bikes that George has to put on display.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Yeah.
All right. Well, hey, so we're about to get out of here. We went over a little bit, but Kim, you have a motorcycle.
I do. I have a tip.
To show us this motorcycle tip. I forgot what it was already.
Yeah. Well,
where's my coffee?
Yeah. So you're going to be
motorcycle tip.
If you're working on your bike and you're doing different kinds of things, you have to make marks on things. And so what I recommend is that you always have one of these handy. These indelible markers are very important.
You didn't know that was a motorcycle tip tool.
Also, make sure you have a red one and a black one.
And a silver one.
And a silver one, because you're going to be marking dark things that you're going to need as well. And these are indispensable when you're marking things for timing, marking things you got to put back. You might even need to write down something, and it's a good thing to have. But have these at the ready so you don't have to go find it.
All right, hey, thanks for checking in. Oh, Dave, just in time for the end song. Okay, Dave Gardner. But you'll have to rewind and watch the whole thing. Hey, Aaron. All right, you guys have a good one. Thanks for tuning in. We really appreciate it. We'll see you later.
Sharpie.
Sharpie.